Welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, the show where we answer your questions about what's going on with your bike, how to fix things, and a pretty wide variety, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get straight into it, no messing about. First of all, we have a question from Andre, and he says, I went on a muddy ride yesterday, and now my dropper post got scratched from pressing it back in. It also works very slow and makes horrible noises when it compresses.
Feel your pain.
Yeah, it's always nasty, eh? What should I do, and can I fix the scratches? Well, it's a bit of a frustrating one, that, because it's kind of, you can feel it even when you can sit on the saddle.
It is horrible. You feel the pain and the damage going onto it.
Yeah, totally. Normally you can just lift up that collar. I think you've even done a video about it in the past.
That's right, yeah. Unscrew the collar, compress the posts, and then you'll find usually the bushes will slide out and give it all a good clean, really.
Yeah, you can use, what you don't want to use is a very viscous or thick grease in there. Yeah. Because it can sometimes become too much for what is not a massively powerful air spring to lift up. It creates too much friction. So when you re-lube it, I would suggest using maybe even a suspension fluid.
Definitely, yeah.
Or something just really
nice
thin.
And light that will stay in place,
And repairing the scratches, how would you go about
that? The thing is with the scratches, they're not really going to do it much harm unless they've got any like burrs on them. So if they have got like sharp burrs, it could scratch the seals and the bushes and that. So you want to file them down with a really fine metal file. You can, if you wanted to, you could use a black marker pen, for example, or a Sharpie, just to colour in the scratch, and then layer up some nail varnish, something like that, something quite tough. Sand it down just to fill in basically that groove that's left in there, the score. It's never going to be as good as it was to start with, but you can do that if the cosmetics bother you.
Yeah, and it's not like if you got a big chunk out of a shaft on an air shock, it's not like it goes into a pressurised chamber and it could be essentially releasing the pressure under compression. But it doesn't look very nice.
No, and I guess there is a kind of argument for you want to try and minimise the amount of opportunity for muck and grit to get in there. So if it is a bad gouge, then why not have a go at that? You're not going to make it worse.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Okay, next up from David. Ask GMBN Tech. I noticed that when I put air in my rear shock, the gauge doesn't show any pressure, though the shock seems to be working. When I back the pump off, I hear some air escaping. Is there like a correct way to attach and remove the pump?
Ooh, this is a pretty good question. So when you'll notice when you're screwing your shock pump on, although it does sound potentially in this case like the dial on your pump isn't working, but I'll get to that in a moment. When you screw the shock pump on, it's amazing how far over the valve you go, how deep that valve goes into the shock pump.
For sure,
before it goes and it pressurises the shock.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is the pressure from the suspension unit is pressurising the shock. So your pressure will sometimes seem a little bit lower. If you just put your shock pump on and on each time, it will reload lower each time. But when you take the shock off, you're almost entirely off the valve before you hear that tss, and it lets the air out. And what that is that's the air coming out of the shock. So you're normally pretty safe.
That can vary as well, can't it?
That can vary.
Different pumps, you never know what it's going to be.
So it's really important to use the same pump every time. It does sound like your dial's just not working, which can happen.
Yep.
I don't know, maybe...
No, it sounds like they're easy to break, to be honest. So you take a bash and the display on them can stop working.
Yeah.
But you can, if you do need to get a new pump, you can get different valves on the pumps now. See the ones that got a double screw on?
Yes.
So you don't lose that air, basically.
Yeah.
So you screw it on, you screw it against itself, and vice versa when you remove it. So in theory, if you're going to lose any air out of your shock, it'll be like minimal, a pound or two maybe, rather than 10 or whatever it could be.
Yeah. And
they can be quite inaccurate otherwise.
Yes, and it's so important to use the same shock pump every time. And also, it sounds stupid, but do a few trial runs and work out at, say, 200 psi or whatever region your pressure is in, that you know how much it loses at that time. Because then if you want to add 2 psi, but you're losing 8 psi
you know
every
where
time,
you are and how much
where
to
you
add.
are. Yeah.
That's a really good shout, actually. It's a good tip, Henry. Nice. Okay, next up from Damien Davids. Hi guys, is it possible to increase the travel from 120 to 140 mil on my Fox 34 Fit for 27.5 fork? I've got a sweet deal on one of these, but it's 120 and I'm really in the market for a 140. Love the show, thanks for great content.
Yeah, it's actually quite a simple job. I mean, we won't go into the handling thing again. I mean, 20 mil sounds like it's kind of pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And all it is the damper is the same on those forks.
Yeah.
It's just the air shaft, which is a different length. I would very much just confirm that with your before you go to the thing, maybe just ring your local Fox dealer and they can kind of talk you through it. But if it's this like recent model years, then it should just swap out, no problem really.
Yeah, it's a 15-minute job. It's super easy, and I don't think the part costs a lot of money.
Yeah,
perhaps $40 or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you're buying the fork from the shop, there's a good chance that they might do a discount on it because they could keep the 120 one that's in there and sell that on. So definitely inquire about that before you buy it.
So next we have a question from Glenn, and he says, how many power links can I have on one chain? I recently snapped my chain on a ride and now have 2 power quick links on my chain. Will this cause me any problems?
To be honest, I'm not sure there's an official recommendation on that. A couple you'll probably be all right with, but you want the least amount as possible.
Yes,
I'd say. But I kind of think we should build a chain out of power links just for a laugh.
Yeah, totally.
And see how durable it is.
There's no reason, I suppose, because they do claim that it's just as strong as any other link.
Yeah.
There's no reason why every outer plate couldn't be a power link. It would look
bizarre. Let's try it.
But you could even do it if you alternated the colours. You know what I mean? You could just go like gold, silver, black, gold, silver, black.
I think you're looking at a very obscure top mod here. And we're going to do that on Henry's bike because I don't want to do it on mine. I've snapped too many chains in my time, resulting in quite a few injuries. So I'll stick away from that one.
Yeah,
thanks.
Totally. I mean, I know personally, I don't like it just aesthetically having more than one power link in it. But that's me just being a bit of a...
Needs must though, repair it on the ride, and I'm sure it would be fine. Just as you should do with any chain, just inspect it. Time to time when you're washing your bike or lubing your chain, just check all those links. And not just the power links, check all of your links, because if any of them are splayed apart, any pins show sign of moving in or out from the outer links of the chain, then it's going to snap at some point. So it's up to you to monitor that. Okay, next up from Mandarinu Horia Mehai. Hopefully I got your name right.
Good, I reckon.
Hey guys, I've done a free hub service on my AV hub. In the video explaining how to do the service, you put very little oil, I put a lot of grease. Is there a problem? I mentioned now that my free hub is much quieter, which suits me. Before it was very noisy, even annoying.
Yeah, it's a good question. So when you have extra grease in there, or kind of fill it with a thicker grease, it will dampen the noise.
So we're talking about the pools moving here?
Yeah, the pools, because they are moving in kind of almost a bath of grease.
Yeah.
They tend to get louder with time as that grease is pushed out of the way.
It thins out a bit as well.
It thins out. I mean, personally, I would normally put a thin skimming of grease over the ratchets, and then a drop of wet lube on each pool. That's it. Sometimes maybe not even the grease. The freehand manufacturers often do not only specify but manufacture grease for a hub, so that's always your best bet, I suppose. Yeah,
and there's also oil available, which is very similar to sewing machine oil, which we found out. In fact, one of you lucky guys tipped us off. One of you guys tipped us off about that. Actually, I don't know where lucky came from. Complete nonsense.
Might be lucky as well, you never know.
But in my experience, I would never put grease in a free body that's got the traditional pools. I've had too many incidents in the past where the pools have actually got stuck and they've not managed to engage properly, which means it could slip. When that slips, you're going out the front door.
And also, if there's anything really obstructing the pool going into the ratchet mechanism properly, then the shallower that fits in, the more wear to that ratchet.
Yeah,
so then it will get shallow over time, and then it risks slipping. So like the only reason I'd ever put grease on there is for water corrosion, to stop that and any rust build-up. But I would put such a light, thin layer, probably a paintbrush, just literally.
In fact, suspension grease would be pretty good because that's super thin.
Super thin.
A good place to put that.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've done it right, but perhaps you might put too much in. In which case, it might be an idea just to remove some of the excess so they can still do their job, and the grease still lubricates for you. Next up from Elias Paul. Hi Henry and Dottie, I've got a spring suspension fork, and when I pull up on the jumps or do wheelies, I'm able to hear and feel how the internal components from the stanchion are extending. If you've seen this comment, give it a heart. We know exactly what that is. That's called top out.
Yes, top out is. Well, actually, it's a pretty common problem with suspension. What it can often be is that what you want is the damper leg, in terms of the internal of the fork, to be a bit longer than the air side leg. What that means is that when the fork bottoms out and goes to full travel, it's actually pulling on the air side, not on the damper. Sometimes it can be the other way around. And what that means is the last part of your travel is undamped. So it just goes
Dunk.
very, very slow, dunk. That can be one reason. You often see it a lot in certain linkages suffer worse from it on the back as well. What I really like is the new MRP shock actually has top-out damping.
That
So
is
it'll go
quite cool.
and then the rebound damp at the last.
Slows at the last
yeah,
bit.
goes slows at the last
Kind of
bit.
like the opposite of a soft close kitchen drawer.
Yeah, maybe that's where they got the inspiration from. He was going to the toilet one day, slammed the lid.
But,
Oh my god.
game changer. Also, not forgetting though, on some budget forks, they don't really have any damping.
Yes, that's true. Sorry, yeah.
And they don't even have the ability to stop that. So it sounds like you might have something that does exactly that. So what you're feeling is the fork literally extending and coming to a stop. And you feel that punk as you pull up.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything that you could...
I'm sure you could do a hack on the inside. I've done it years ago on an old RST fork, and I actually cut up the rubber from some handlebar grips.
I was going to say elastomer.
Made my own top-out bumper. Maybe there's a little hack we can do. I'm sure we can find some budget forks and see if we can help it, because that might be a solution for you. But you won't be able to calm it down by adjusting damping, because there won't be any
potentially not, yeah,
in your fork. But if it is topping out, it's just a horrible sensation. It shouldn't be doing you any damage.
Yeah.
You should be okay.
And also, I mean, it's worth noting that even really high-end forks and shocks do still rely on a little rubber grommet in there. You know, it's crazy.
Anything.
Yeah. So it's. I mean, it would be a bit of a bodge, but I think it would be functional.
I think so. Yeah, let's give it a go.
So next we have a question from Joshua, and he says, I got a new enduro bike, but it has a 34.9 seat post. Can I get from a 30, you can only get hold of a 31.6 dropper post. Is a shim a safe and reliable option?
Yeah, as long as the shims are long enough, and depending on where your frame is, as long as the post is supported correctly, then yeah, it's absolutely fine. I've done that before on a Kona Honzo that also had a 34.9, and I had the same problem, couldn't find a dropper post to suit. I used a USE shim. So USE is a British company, Ultimate Sports Engineering. You might know them also for making exposure lights.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and they make special shims, and they're quite deep as well, so they work really well. But as with any post, you've got to make sure you either use an assembly compound, a carbon gripper, grease, depending on what your frame is made of, to make sure it doesn't stick in there.
I can't believe, it reminded me of a time, and I couldn't believe what was happening. I've said it before, where a guy's got quite a 27.2 seat post.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can't get the one shim that's the right size. So we got one shim, and I was like, took that out.
Another shim?
There was another shim. Just shims and shims and shims.
I've seen someone do it with Coke cans before.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which I would definitely not recommend, but it is a complete hack to get you home if something does happen and you can only get that size post. But yeah, it's absolutely fine. Just make sure there's plenty of overlap and there's nice support in the frame. It's not going to stress any part of it, and you should be fine.
Yeah, like I said, as long as it's nice and clean and stuff. Yeah, all good.
Well, there we go. There's another Ask GMBN Tech in the bag. If you've got any questions or you want to ask us any questions, don't forget to put them in the comments below. Use that hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, and we'll chuck you on the show next week. For a couple more videos, click down here for Henry's brake hacks. Super good video, that one.
Yeah, and click down here for Doddy's roundup of sea otter.
Cool, and as always, don't forget to give us a huge thumbs up if you love GMBN Tech, and keep those suggestions coming in. We rely on you to make the content that you guys like.